Hey, this is Nick Millivoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarists podcast, where each week we talk about one of the 100 guitar players that we think you should know. Maybe you do know them, maybe you don't know them, but we think you should know them. Today, we're talking about the king of the surf guitar, Dick Dale.
And I think today is one of those like prototypical 100 Guitarist episodes where you might have heard his name. You undoubtedly have heard at least one of his songs. You probably have a good idea of a basic view of what his style sounds like, but you've never took that next step and checked out his records.
Well, maybe you have. Some of us have.
Some of us have. Some of us did today.
Before we talk about that any further, we want to remind you that you can hit us up, get at us at 100 Guitarists at premierguitar.com. And we love to get voicemails and texts to 319-423-9734. You can also rate us on your podcast apps. You can leave us some comments on YouTube. You can like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. All that stuff really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. And you know what else we really appreciate? We really appreciate our sponsorship for today's episode from Traveler Guitars. Jason, tell us a little bit about Traveler Guitars.
So Traveler Guitars is a very well-named company. They make guitars. They make acoustics, electrics, basses that are easy to travel with. And they've been doing this since 1992.
So it's not just a clever name.
Not just a clever name. And these are full-scale guitars. These aren't tiny little ukuleles shaped things. So after 3 decades, they are still focused on the same goal, providing high-quality, portable solutions for mobile musicians. The best-selling ultralight acoustics and electrics are full 24 and 3/4 inch scale, and they weigh less than 3.5 pounds.
Traveler Guitars use standard acoustic, electric, and bass strings from D'Addario, and they offer acoustic, electric, hybrid, and bass models that feature a variety of onboard electronics, preamps, headphone amps, and tuners. Every single Traveler guitar comes standard with a custom-fitted gig bag, and every single guitar is inspected regardless of price point at Traveler Guitars' California headquarters.
Every guitar is backed by a lifetime warranty, and they have US-based customer service. So if you head on over to travelerguitar.com and use the code 100Guitarists, you will get 15% off. Right? And those hybrid ones, I had to look that up to see what those are about. So those are acoustic. They have a piezo pickup and a magnetic, humbucker single coil with them. So if you want to double dip in those. So head on over to travelerguitar.com. And as always, thanks Traveler Guitar for the support. All right. So today we're talking about Dick Dale. And Dick Dale is one of those guitar players where you wouldn't necessarily call him a chameleon, because he basically kind of stayed in his lane of surf guitar. He basically invented surf guitar, right? And he kind of came of note right around the same time that Leo Fender was developing the Stratocaster. Him and Leo were tight. Plays a Stratocaster, he's a lefty who plays a left-handed model that's strung right-handed. So the low string is on the bottom, high string is on top, right? Which I think we're going to talk about leads quite a bit to his sound.
Yes. And I will say, just to speak to that for a second, there are interviews where Dick Dale says that he thought of Leo Fender as like a second father to him, and they were so tight. We'll talk more about how they work together, but there is a story of the first time he saw Dick sit down with a Stratocaster and play it upside down. Apparently, Leo thought that was the funniest thing. It's why would you do that?
And his probably most well-known entrance into the mainstream ecosphere of guitar is his performance of Misirlou. That was from Pulp Fiction, basically the theme from Pulp Fiction.
Definitely the thing that made him most visible.
Exactly. So I can't really nail down a time when I first heard Dick Dale. It's very possible the first time I heard Dick Dale was Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I'm sure the first time. Yeah, I'm sure the first time I heard him, or the first time I heard him and was paying attention.
Right. So he kind of had these two periods of his career. He had the early to mid 60s at the height of when he kind of invented this sound, at the height of surf guitar. He had about 4, 5, 6 albums. And then he kind of took some time off. And then he kind of had this resurgence in the late 80s, early 90s, right before Pulp Fiction came out. And then once Pulp Fiction hits, then he explodes, and he kind of carries that wave pretty much through the end of his life.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so I think, you to dig in a little bit, like the thing about Dick Dale that is why he's on this list and why we're making an episode about him today is that, you get in the late 50s, early 60s, Dick was he was a surfer. He was a surf guitar player who actually was a surfer, which not all of the members of the surf bands at the time necessarily, it was a trend, a musical trend, but he was actually a surfer apparently. And he was throwing these shows at the Rendezvous Ballroom, basically like doing the same thing that, like, not that nobody had done this before, but doing what like hardcore bands in the 80s were doing. He's like renting out this ballroom on the beach in I think it's Newport Beach. And my understanding is it was like an all old like big band venue. And he's renting them out and he starts throwing these shows. And he's got his distinct style. And I want to talk about what makes his style, but basically he's throwing these shows. They start getting huge. Word gets to Leo, word gets to Fender. They link up and they end up working on stuff together because the shows are getting bigger and bigger, and he needs bigger and bigger amplifiers to meet his demand. Like he wants to be louder and louder because hundreds of kids are showing up to these shows that he's throwing. I think that is like just that part of the story alone is really interesting, and like kind of like, this proto punk rock thing that really appeals to me. And the fact that it's tied to like this like high level technical guitar playing, like that like checks all the boxes for me, that whenever I just think about that, I get really excited about Dick Dale and who he was and where he came from. But the thing we're here to talk about, and the thing that is most notable, is that sound that was created in that environment. So we should unpack that a little bit. And I want to start unpacking it by thinking about Misirlou specifically. That was his first single, and it was the biggest thing he would ever do.
Yeah. And he didn't write that song.
He did not write that song. So that's have you ever performed that song?
Oh, no.
So I've performed Misirlou many times. Misirlou is an interesting song. It's a traditional that goes back. It's sort of claimed by different cultures as like parts of those cultures. So I've played that at klezmer gigs. I've played that at Turkish gigs. I've played that at Sephardic gigs. I've played surf gigs where I've played it. I've played jazz gigs where I've played it. I've played Misirlou in just about every situation. At the time that Dick recorded it, I don't know. I'm not really, when you read about stuff, it's like, it's hard to know what it actually felt like, because the time, you go back to the middle of the 20th century. That's like, I don't know what it felt like to live then, because I didn't live then. But what I can say is that there had been charting hits or charting records
Versions
of Misirlou. So like Harry James recorded a version of Misirlou that charted. Jan August, the piano player, Jan August, I'm not actually sure, had recorded a version of it. Those are two very cool versions of Misirlou, and there are versions of that song that predate both of those. So it was around. I don't know if he was recording this song as it was a hit, or it was just, or what. He knew it. So Dick, his father was Lebanese, and he had an uncle who played, I believe, oud. And he would play Misirlou, and that was where Dick first got to know the song. And so it's like he knows it from that music, And that's sort of like part of the story. Now, you can watch interviews, stories evolve a little bit, as with a lot of people. But Dick was a big personality. So it's like, I don't always know when I've watched interviews with him or heard people talk about things he said, what exactly was true and what is like, what's what. But, he plays, it's mostly on one string that he plays it. And his reason that I've heard for that is because he's like, he knew it as an oud song, and that's how his uncle played it. So you have this thing already. His first song, there's so much that's unique and such a personality to what he's doing, because he's taking this song that's a Middle Eastern song that's going to like rise to this like mega hit. Okay. And then he's playing it as an instrumental guitar song, one string, odd technique, odd sound. So just to get up to that point, like think about, Jason, when you hear Misirlou, like in his sound, like how unique. Don't think about anything that comes before it. Put yourself at that time. Nothing sounds like that, right?
Nothing
like that
sounds
amount
like
of reverb, that percussiveness, all that stuff.
Right. And I think his style was born out of a lot of things, and it kind of peaked, you could say, with that track, is that he had this new instrument, this new Stratocaster, relatively new instrument. It'd been around about almost a decade by the time he recorded this. He played very heavy strings, like painfully heavy,
super
strings.
duper heavy,
Painfully
16s,
heavy. 16 to a million. And so, and how
I've heard him say
played,
16 to 58, and I've heard it said 16 to 60. So it probably changed over the course of his career. But
I'm sure. Either way, it's pain. Either way, that just sounds like pain. But the thing was, he had a very percussive, almost like typewriter-like right hand.
Yeah. And
I think because of how his guitar was set up, that low string, which was the string, right? Again, I've never played it. You play it on the 6th string or the 5th string?
He jumps octaves.
Okay.
So I think he plays it on both.
On both, right. Okay. So the fact that he's hitting those low strings, and they're on, you got to think, for us as right-handed guitar players, tremolo picking on the high E string is infinitely easier than tremolo picking on sometimes on the low E string, because for me it's just like an angle there. But him just hitting that and having his arm in the right way, that he's plumbing away on spatially the lowest string, but also the lowest pitch string, I think that added to a lot. I think also having 100-watt, I bet you he was, again, I never saw him live, I bet you he was loud as hell.
I've heard, unfortunately I've never seen him live. And, but I've heard from people who saw him even later in his, like, in more recent years before he died. He was still traveling around with showmans.
Yeah.
And
100-watt showmans. Probably 2 of them.
Amps, a couple of them. And I've heard it was just a wave of sound.
So
super. And imagine going back to the ballroom. He's having these shows on the beach. That's not modern PA systems. That's just cooking amps. And he was
hot glass.
Just like, it had to be the feeling of being in that room to hear that stuff just like blazing off of the stage must have been so awesome.
Because really, at its core, the elements of his tone are fairly simple.
Yeah.
A single coil guitar, heavy strings, a loud clean amp, and a spring reverb. And a lot of spring reverb, let's say. Whether you get it through a tank or a pedal or whatever, a lot of spring reverb, right? So the basic recipe for that is pretty simple. He's not using, I tell you what, he would never use a modeler.
He would not use a modeler.
He's like, I got this guitar, I got that amp, we're going to crank those knobs up, we're going to turn the reverb up, and we're going to roll, That there's something really inspiring about having him create this kind of whole genre of music. Now, he did have some vocal and instrumental tunes. And there was one tune I sent you before this went off of him playing on the Ed Sullivan show, right? Did you see that? Did you get to the guitar solo?
I didn't watch that whole video.
So he's playing this song. It's surfing and swinging or whatever. Surfing and singing. Swinging. Right.
I've heard the song, but I didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
The guitar solo is Misirlou.
Oh, you know what? I did listen to it. Yeah.
The guitar solo. He plays. I
was just thinking he plays Misirlou.
Misirlou. Right.
Yeah.
And so even at that, and this was probably 64, I think, around there when that was happening.
And Misirlou came out in 62. So this is a little bit after he's playing his new song. And then he's like,
I'm going to sneak a little bit of this in here because this is what people kind of know me for. You know what I mean? So he was always thinking, he way before, decades before Pulp Fiction, he knew that his hit really was going to help fill the seats of the auditorium and get people on the beach. You know what I'm saying?
And, this is the thing about, like, I have no interest in those other songs.
Zero.
King of Surf Guitar, when he sings, it's a cool moniker, but he sings that song, it's super cheesy. I'm not interested in it. He sings some bluesy songs, not interested in it. Misirlou is his crowning achievement, right?
It's his whole legacy, I think.
And we can talk a little bit more about, I don't know that it necessarily has to be his best track even. It's just it's his crowning achievement.
Yeah.
It's his biggest thing that he did. And it's the most groundbreaking. Whether, there's stuff he did later that I think rivals the awesomeness of that song, but it's never going to be as influential.
No. But real quick, you mentioned other versions of Misirlou that were recorded before his, but I think his was the first to be recorded at that tempo.
Yeah, it's in those other versions, it's a lot chiller.
They're pretty chill, and not to say that like
that,
Harry James couldn't have recorded a burning version of Misirlou or something, but he just didn't.
No,
and
even did you check out Dick's version of Hava Nagila?
Yeah,
like Hava Nagila, played that a million times too. I've never gotten a chance to perform that in. Well, actually, I did once do the Dick Dale version of it, but that's a separate thing. It's like you don't get to play it that way. The way he plays Hava Nagila is like, it's just, he gives it the Misirlou treatment, and it's awesome. And you can see that's what he was going for. He was like, maybe this will work too. I think probably more people knew that song, and it probably, that's why it didn't have quite the impact. But it does the same thing. He goes there. It's got an exotic scale. He's getting the same sound. It's super percussive, and I want to talk about his sound a little bit, actually. So you mentioned his strings. There's the strings. There's the way his guitar is set up. Okay, the reverb thing. The drippiness of his reverb is so important. You try and play Misirlou or any of these songs with your reverb not up enough. It's not the right thing. You have to get it up beyond a certain point where, it's sort of, I feel like you could define it a little bit, but kind of this undefinable drip. It's like it's getting, it's wet. And there has to be this extra percussive thing. You can see it behind me right there. I have a Fender reverb head. That was a revelation to me. And I really have this to get that sound, the Dick Dale sound, because I wanted to be able to feel that. And there's something about doing it with the reverb head versus within an amp. Not that you can't get it within tube reverb in an amp, but you can get it up beyond a certain point, and the springs are longer in those. So that helps. But you can get you can get it just enough where it's like it starts to just become one with the guitar tone.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear when I hear Dick Dale's tone with the right reverb sound. I mean, always the right reverb sound in his tone. But when I hear somebody do it, it's like that's what it's pointing to. That's what that is supposed to sound like. And to me, it's like he and Leo had this relationship where he was testing out gear to him. So it's like he's the test case. Like Jimmy Bryant was kind of Leo's, I don't know, might be overstating it, the same muse. I don't totally know the whole story, but he was like he was his test case for the Telecaster, right? Mm-hmm. And you listen to Jimmy Bryant's music, I always think like there is the first Telecaster player. Not just literally he's the first person playing the Telecaster because he was, but also he's the first, like he is establishing the vocabulary that becomes like Tele vocabulary versus Strat vocabulary versus any other guitar, right? And that's how I feel about like Dick Dale figured out what like lead guitar reverb is.
Yeah.
And you know, it has to do with the percussive thing, you know.
I bet you played with heavy picks too.
Yeah, I would be curious. Yeah.
I would be
don't know.
Surprised if he didn't have heavy picks.
Yeah. He said that you know, Gene Krupa was one of his main influences. That he thought about the guitar like a drummer. And like, yeah, get it. I totally hear that. So that sound, it's interesting because we will cover other instrumental guitar players from this period and other surf guitar players, but it's all a different thing. And I think what you hear a lot of times is like surf guitar now, all these years later, sort of references Dick Dale's sound when you hear lead surf guitar. It's, even though the other bands use reverb, it's like it's this different thing.
And to kind of put this in a timeline perspective, he came out with these tracks before the Beach Boys. Like the Beach Boys were influenced by Dick Dale. Yeah. So to me, surf guitar and surf music kind of have two real distinct branches. The kind of real poppy Beach Boysy thing that ended up being much, much bigger hits. And then this kind of instrumental branch that was earlier. The sound came together earlier via Dick Dale, but was far less successful. You know what I mean? So he made these 5 records in the 60s, Dick Dale and his Dale tones. Now help me out, Nick. What happened that made him, help me unpack this, what happened that made him take a 30-year break?
Oh, he got cancer.
He got cancer.
Yeah, gotcha. He was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. Stopped playing. That I think that was in the mid 60s, and then you know my understanding of the story is like he stopped playing for a while, and there's one narrative. I was just watching a video with him talking about this, where he didn't really come back till the 80s. But then I listened to an interview with somebody just this morning, and they're talking about hearing him playing in the 70s. So I think he must have been doing some playing, but he didn't really come back till the early 80s. And I think at that point, you know, there's a video of him. He's hanging out with his tigers. He had pet tigers, among other exotic animals, I believe. And that
83 record was titled, the live album was The Tigers Loose.
Yeah. Also punk rock. That's a self-released album. And so that video around that 83 album, around Tigers Loose, he's talking about how, you know, he thought like, all right, his time is over. The thing he does is like old timey now. But he heard Devo and the B-52s specifically referencing surf sounds. And he realized that there was demand for what he was doing again. And he really dug the way that they were approaching surf music. And so that he decided to start performing again.
And then
makes sense to me.
It totally does. And then
he comes back and he stays back.
Yeah, he really started to see some success in the early 90s. Another level of success.
Yeah, so in the 90s he starts doing studio records again.
Yeah.
And to me, that's his actual best stuff.
I think so too.
Misirlou aside. Misirlou is this other thing, and it established him. And I think he had the sound, and it shows that he's a visionary, and that he has this idea for how to put these sounds together. And he was able to do that on a couple tracks throughout those albums. But the discography, the output is, you know, he's got Surfer's Choice, King of the Surf Guitar, Checkered Flag, Mr. Eliminator, Summer Surf. And then there's compilations too. Even Checkered Flag, I mean, that's not a surf album. That's referring to a specific sort of like car themed thing that goes on with these instrumental guitar bands around that time too. But he is like, it wasn't as solidly established because he's singing a lot of songs there too. It's listening to those records, looking for Misirlou. I always find to be a disappointing experience, but you go to Tribal Thunder and start there.
You're good. You're good.
Man, that stuff hits super hard. Like the songs are like heavy. His tone is perfect. Like it's that thing on every track.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a thing he does that I think is one of the coolest things. It's just a little like Dick Dale-ism. I try and copy it as much as I can when it makes sense in a gig I'm playing. You know, so it's
oh,
but
that thing.
that
Yeah.
way he does it, it's the high strings and with the reverb. It's not notes. It's just the
yeah.
It's the wave. Man, every time I hear that, it's just like it's a visceral feeling. I love it. And these records are so well recorded that it's like you hear it. He does it all the time, but it really it feels almost like a scream. It's wow, like that kind of like David Lee Roth, you know.
It reminds me a lot of like now the BB King version of that is going up an octave and and hitting the one note, you know.
The shredder version with a Floyd Rose, right?
Yep.
But it's like, you know, this is what Dick Dale was playing all the way back in the day. But it's like hearing it and feeling it on these records, it's really well recorded. It just sounds huge.
In like pitch and approach and everything, it's like the literal inverse of like a shredder dive bomb.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the literal inverse of that.
But it's funny because it's like the shredder dive bomb is why it's the inverse is the shredder dive bomb involves like a whammy bar, you know,
right?
And loose strings. He's got the heaviest, tightest strings, and there's no vibrato. It's just
if Billy Gibbons picked up Dick Dale's guitar, would he just like melt in place, or would he just pick it up and be like, nope?
Well, think about that. We've talked about Billy Gibbons, as well as BB King and Tony Iommi, all using super light strings. And I think in each case, we're talking about using like 8s.
At least.
Dick Dale's high E was twice. Yeah. It was 2 of those strings.
So they're like almost
awesome is that?
So probably their third string is his first string.
Yeah, right.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. So he starts making these records in the 90s, and he sees like he's on Conan O'Brien, you know, and I'm guessing
that's you said that's pre Pulp Fiction.
That was pre, right? Yeah. The clip I saw was like 93, and
Pulp Fiction was what?
Pulp Fiction was in 94. So I don't know if it was maybe he knew it was coming or whatever, but it was probably those early 90s records. The level of success, maybe it got on Quentin's radar. I don't know. Or maybe Quentin just remembered Misirlou from way back in the day.
Yeah. Do you remember the ads in guitar magazines in the 90s with Dick Dale with his Sparkle Strat? Sparkle 11? And I remember seeing that and being like, who is this? Pre Pulp Fiction, and realizing that he maybe Pulp Fiction was out and I didn't like put it together who he was, and he was that guy. It was like, I remember seeing pictures of him, you know, he's older. So it's like in a magazine full of like these younger players and a few really established old guys. I would see this and be like, who's this old guy?
Right.
With his like chartreuse Sparkle Strat backwards, headband on, and just like looking cool. Like it's sort of like those ads captured my imagination.
When I started looking at the cover art for the 90s records, I immediately flashed on seeing those.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like they had them. It was like Tribal Thunder was like a little inset on the Fender ad.
100%.
Like,
Tribal Thunder, I remember, and calling up Spirits, his last record, which blindingly amazing me. He played the Warp Tour in 96.
Oh man, so cool. That's so punk.
Warp Tour. He's probably going on at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
In a parking lot in Cincinnati and just ripping.
Yeah.
Ripping. You know, and I bet those young punk rock kids just ate it up. I mean, that spirit and that vibe and that feeling is all throughout Dick Dale's music.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
I want to say, you mentioned seeing the covers of those albums in the ad. The cover art for those 3 albums is very much of their time. I mean, Unknown Territory looks like it might have been made. You know, it wasn't because it was 1994, but you could make it in Paint in, you know, years later.
Yeah, he needed help with that. That's
Well,
he needed some help with the cover art.
I'm gonna tell you what. Don't let it scare you away. Don't let the cover art scare you away about the quality of those albums.
No.
But also being a fan of them and looking at the cover art, man, I kind of love it. I mean, Calling Up Spirits is an airbrush photo of him looking at some children
and he's
in the sky in the middle of the desert. Sure. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, he seems to like appear in the clouds, and there's faces in the clouds.
Yeah.
Like ghosts.
Oh, man. I never looked at that really up close. You're right. We're
going to do a 12-part. Our next podcast is going to be just about this cover art and looking for all the little nuggets in it.
Do you know? Okay, here's a fun little thing. On Calling Up Spirits, you know who plays it without looking at it? If you're looking at the credits, it's not as exciting, but who plays keyboards?
Vince Welnick.
Vince Welnick of the Grateful Dead.
That's right. So is Dick Dale a jam band? Let's answer that. Is Dick Dale a jam band?
Definitely not.
I mean, he doesn't really have long songs. So we're gonna say
it's
no.
It's all about the parts.
Dick Dale is not. I mean, he's rolling trio usually. I think when he was touring his later in life, he was just rolling trio.
Do you know why he covers Jimi Hendrix's Third Stone from the Sun?
Because he enjoys that song.
In Jimi Hendrix's recording of that song, I don't know if it was that I don't know what the prognosis of Dick Dale's cancer diagnosis was at the time. But like, I guess the idea was things weren't looking good. And he says in there, you won't hear surf guitar anymore. You won't hear surf guitar no more. And that's a reference to Dick Dale being diagnosed with cancer and retiring and having, health battles. And so that was like a little Dick Dale tribute in Third Stone from the Sun.
We're also going to give a shout out.
It became a thing that Dick played when he came back.
We're also going to give a shout out to Huey Lewis.
Wait, tell me about that.
Plays harmonica on Unknown Territory. On two tracks.
Wow.
Ghost Riders. He's the harmonica player on Ghost Riders.
I didn't realize that.
Huey Lewis, fantastic harmonica player.
Fantastic everything.
So he plays these. So then Pulp Fiction hits. That song is literally everywhere.
Yeah.
They make dance remixes of everything.
Yeah.
He probably at that point he probably wishes he could have recorded it. Or he would have wrote it. I mean, he would have wrote it because I'm sure the checks were sizable. And then he kind of just rides that wave, So his last record was in 2001, which I haven't heard. Spatial Disorientation.
No, I don't know that one.
I don't know that one. I don't believe it's on streaming.
Yeah.
And then he spends the next 18 years just hitting the road.
Yeah, just
ripping it up,
blazing.
And then he passed away in 2019 at the age of 81.
So let's talk about his influence for a second. I really like surf music. I really like Dick Dale and other surf bands. In modern surf, or anything past the first wave of surf music, there are a lot of artists, a lot of bands who've come and done something that, a lot. Let me re-say that. In anything past the first wave of surf, when new surf bands come up, there's a thing that they're copying that makes it an automatic throwback band. And there are cases where this isn't the case, bands that sort of took it to a new place. And that's what he's talking about when he was talking about the B-52s and Devo. It's like they're playing on this kitschy thing and doing something new with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But surf as a genre is like an old-timey thing. It's a throwback to the 60s. When I hear new surf music, bands that exist today, very few have like virtuosic guitar playing. I mean, there are some people out there who play in like a sort of a virtuosic style, and can rip on guitar, but they're referencing Dick Dale.
Mhm.
It's not a new vocabulary. It's like that vocabulary that he established is the vocabulary of surf, except for a few really rare cases that because they're doing something different than Dick Dale end up being, not traditional surf.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this, just like, you have bands contemporary to Dick, the Shantays, the Surfaris, the Ventures, who are their own thing, really. But the Shantays and the Surfaris, other surf bands around the time, like they're not instrumental surf bands. I'm not talking about vocal surf. And they're cool. I like that music. It's a different thing. Other people like came at surf music with their own edge. There's a band called the Mermen that have been around. I think they still exist, but they came around much later. They have a little bit more of a psychedelic thing, but I feel like there's like a nod to Dick in they're heavier than like other things that are like throwback surf bands. And I like that. They have sort of a heavier sound. But to me, when I think of virtuosic things that he inspired, are you familiar with the guitar player? I'm not going to say his name that great. Takeshi Terauchi, the Japanese guitar player.
Is that the video you sent me earlier today?
No, we'll talk about that in a moment. Takeshi Terauchi, one of the great Fender signature guitars that is not super well known because it was a Japanese only guitar. You got to check that out. That's a great looking guitar. He played like a surf style that was real virtuosic and had his own vocabulary. He is somebody I think like that really did it. I don't know the connection of guitarist Omar Khorshid. He's an Egyptian guitar player. I don't know exactly. He came after, most of his work was in the 70s. So that came well after Dick Dale. I've always assumed that he heard Dick Dale, but I don't really, I think he must have because of the way that he plays. He's playing Middle Eastern songs with a Strat with a really reverby sound. And that's the video that I sent you earlier.
Oh, okay.
And to me, it's like he must be building on that. Obviously,
it's
Omar Khorshid is. Go ahead. Yeah.
Dick's sound is so like nothing before him sounded like that, right?
Right.
So everything after him that references that is directly or indirectly influenced by him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel the same about reggae in a way.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's like before Bob Marley made it huge and then kind of after. But
yeah,
you know what I mean? But I'm going to say hot take. To me, a lot of instrumental surf music sounds the same. Right?
As a fan of instrumental surf, I don't disagree with you. But I think it's because of what I'm saying here, which is like, if you go too far, if you're playing surf music, playing lead guitar surf music, and you don't follow Dick's sound strictly, it's by definition, it's a super conservative scene.
Yeah.
I made this record a few years ago that I thought to me was a surf record. I sent it to some surf labels,
You got voted off the island, didn't you?
Oh, dude, I got voted off the island. It's the least experimental album I've ever made. But it was still, it doesn't follow the exact formula, so it doesn't fit that thing. And
please tell me you called it like Nick Melavoy singing and swinging.
No, it's called Grassy Sound, which is the name of a beach town.
There's not a lot of grass on the beach, bro.
And the album is called The Sounds of Grassy Sound.
Okay.
It's a beach town here in New Jersey, but yeah, it's a little too weird to get gigs with this. What'd you say?
Surfing capital of New Jersey.
Not quite. But like, couldn't get gigs with the surf bands that play around here, and there are some great ones. But I get it. Like there's a formula you have to follow. So it's by like de facto, everything kind of has to sound the same. And that's not Dick's fault. That's actually like, it sort of waters down the legacy, right? Yeah, so when I hear somebody like Omar Khorshid, who is very much not a household name here, I don't know how big he is in Egypt. I've never been to Egypt, so I can't be sure. But like when I hear that, I get really excited because I'm like, I can hear Dick Dale's sound in here doing something different. He's taking this to another place. He's also, yes, he's got the surf drippy tone going. He also has a phaser on it, and he's playing Middle Eastern scales. Like, this is awesome. We're going somewhere else. You know, and another place you hear it, man, thrash metal.
Oh, totally.
That might be the most innovative place for Dick Dale style.
Knowingly or unknowingly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That probably went through half a dozen filters before it got to like San Francisco in the early 80s. But but that's where that came from. You know, that's where that came from. I think that's pretty good.
You take some like early 80s thrash, play it with the surf tone, it works. It's the same material.
James Hetfield and Dick Dale are way more connected than people might think.
Hot take.
Hot take. All right, so Dick Dale, go check him out. To me, he's also the quintessential compilation artist, because you could get one of his compilations, the Better Shred. I'd recommend the Better Shred Than Dead, the Dick Dale anthology from '97.
And is there a better name me a better titled compilation album?
Better Shred Than Dead. Come on. I mean, it's 2 CDs. You're going to get everything you need to, and it's going to be great. Put that on your next barbecue this summer, and listen to some surf music.
But I still say check out Tribal Thunder.
Tribal Thunder, yeah.
Any of those 3 records.
Any of those 3 records are solid. So.
All right, so before we get out of here, let's talk a little bit about what we've been listening to, things we want to sort of shout out. If you're listening to this and you're like, wow, these guys just talked about a whole lot of Dick Dale albums I got to listen to.
Not that many.
No, actually, no. But I need something else. I need something that doesn't sound like surf music to also listen to. What should I listen to? We got a couple ideas for you.
Yes.
So I'll go first. I want to draw attention to one of the biggest friends of the podcast, who's been a guest. He's been a caller on a couple episodes.
Thai food aficionado.
And as well as a musical colleague of mine. So good friend of the podcast, good musical friend, Andy Pitcher is releasing his first solo album. When we record this, it comes out tomorrow. By the time you hear this, it'll have been out for a couple weeks. The album is called Dot. It is, without looking at the tracks, I'm going to say I'm pretty confident. I bet 90% of it is Andy's guitar. And then there's some programmed drum stuff he did, and then some live drum stuff that's on there too. But it's mostly a guitar record that is like a very big, to me, very exciting vision of guitar music. I can hear, because Andy is a good friend, I can hear a lot of specific references in there that he's drawing on.
My Bloody Valentine, maybe?
My Bloody Valentine, I would say, is not a major influence on this record, but is definitely
deep in there.
There is definitely some shoegazy sort of harmony and sonic stuff on there, but a lot of acoustic guitar on here, a lot of amazing effect stuff. If a lot of people who know about Andy know him from, doing a lot of gear demos, taking sort of an experimental approach to how he approaches pedals, and being sort of a wizard of pedals, specifically a wizard of the Line 6 DL4. That's all on this record. But it also is a showcase for Andy's harmony and his rhythmic writing, and just how all this comes together. Again, this is his first album. It's a big vision. This is a very bold first album. I love it. I think that everybody should check it out. Anybody who likes, forward-thinking guitar music. I know that it's one of my favorite. I'm biased, but it's definitely one of my favorite things that I've heard yet in 2025, and I totally imagine it will stay that way.
Dig it. All right. So we're going to put links to Andy's down.
Yeah, you can find that on Andy's Bandcamp.
So my pick this week is not a new record. And actually, I couldn't believe it when I pulled it up here. It came out in October of 2008.
Oh, wow.
And it's one of my favorite instrumental records of all time. And it's Lifeboat. It's Jimmy Herring's first solo record.
Okay.
And Jimmy recently had a little cancer scare, but he's back out there now with Widespread Panic, sounding great. But this is not Widespread Panic. This, I would also throw in his second, Subject to Change Without Notice, his second solo record. But this one to me, I mean, Scapegoat Blues. Have you heard that track? It's like a diminished blues type thing.
Yeah.
You know, that's almost become a standard with jam band kids. There's even a great video of Neely Brosh playing it note for note in her dorm room at Berkeley.
Oh yeah, you sent me that.
You know, he does Jungle Book Overture, One Strut, Gray Day, Transients, Lost, Splash. I mean, it's like, to me, he has that same kind of touch that like Jeff Beck has on those three fusion-y records. You know, Beckola and Wired, and you know, it's that kind of vibe, but it's a more modern twist, and it's really, really great. Every song has a different vibe, and even on his second solo record, there's some country stuff on there. There's one song called 12 Keys where he literally plays ahead, and it doesn't like plays a melody and then repeats a melody in 12 keys. He plays a through composed melody that hits on all 12 keys without it sounding like a Schoenberg
like an
math exercise or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is amazing. So I want to give shout out to Jimmy Lifeboat. I really hope potentially there could be another solo record that he puts out, because it's well overdue. Because this one was in 2008 and Subject to Change was in 2012. Bilgewater Blues, great baritone guitar sound on that one. And he does Within You, Without You. Miss Poopy, the organ groove thing is great. So both Jimmy Herring records. Both.
Maybe we need to get Jimmy on as a guest on the podcast, so that way we can take a minute to ask him, you know, what's the plan here? You gonna make another solo record?
He has heard from me several times about
good.
The need. That is not and I'm sure I'm not the only one in his universe that it's, you know, okay, it's been 12 years since a solo record has come out. So, you know, go call your son-in-law there. Let's get going. Let's get Derek involved. Whatever we got to do. Let's make a solo record, Jimmy. Come on.
All right. Well, we would like to thank Traveler Guitar once again for sponsoring this episode. Listeners of the pod can save 15% off anything right now at travelerguitar.com when they use the code 100Guitarists at checkout.
Get something for your summer travels. Pick up a guitar.
Right.
All right. If you want to get in touch with us, hit us up at 100guitarist at premierguitar.com, or you can call us at 319-423-9734. Leave a voicemail, leave a text. Let us know what you think. What's your favorite Dick Dale record? And why is it the compilation? Better Shred Than Dead. That to me is my favorite Dick Dale record. So, all right, Nick, we did it, and we'll see everybody next week.
See you next week.